They're just looking to extract more value and more margin from the brands who sell on their platform. This Week in E-Commerce, episode 111. I am Mal Chia, back with you for another week. This time I am flying solo as Alex is, well, she's going to be boating with her dad, actually, down the Murray River as part of the Tinny Rally. So I'm excited to find out how that went for her, because she is going to be completely off-grid, which is kind of unheard of for people in our industry, but really cool nonetheless. Now, it has been yet another massive week in retail, and we're going to cover off some of the headlines very, very soon. But before that, I just want to acknowledge that we are only a few days out now from Black Friday, or at least Cyber Month beginning. So by the time this hits your favorite podcasting streaming channel of choice, we're only going to be a couple of days out from the start of November, which is the unofficial start of Cyber Month. And no doubt you are already seeing a lot of sales starting to hit your inbox. I've seen at least 3 or 4 in the last couple of days alone. Now, not called Black Friday, but masked as something else, whether it be an invitation-only sale or a blackout sale, you name it. People are making any excuse up to kick off their sales season now. And from all reports, we are gearing up to have an absolute bumper month in retail, because all our customers have been waiting for this moment to shop. But before we get too far into that, I'm going to cover off our first quickies of the week. Our first one off the rank is LSKD are going global and are planning to open 29 stores by 2026. Now, they're already at 12 stores around the world in the US and Australia. They are now looking to add additional stores to their network, primarily in the US, New Zealand, Singapore, and the UAE are all markets which have been flagged. Now, this is showing that LSKD are continuing to try to grow aggressively. From all reports, their annual revenue is somewhere around the $150 million mark, which is a fantastic result for this brand, which started as Loose Kid many, many years ago and has evolved into the activewear athleisure juggernaut, which is LSKD. So that's really awesome to see. And each one of these stores are beautifully appointed. They are these billboards and content studios and conversion engines which are just dedicated to the brand. And so really well done to Jason, Keith, and the team there for doing an incredible job to continue to grow the brand despite the tough challenges, and really using that physical retail to help drive that momentum. Now, no doubt you would have heard of K-pop Demon Hunters. K-pop Demon Hunters is possibly the movie phenomenon of the year. People of all generations, from kids through to grandparents, all know K-pop Demon Hunters. They've heard the songs, they know the dances, they've seen the movies, they've fallen in love with Rumi and the gang. And it seems that Netflix are fully on board and have recognized this and have officially announced a deal with Mattel and Hasbro to co-produce official toys for the movie. Now, this is really special in the fact that Mattel and Hasbro are actually competitors. So it's very rare that you see a brand partner with 2 others in the same space. But it all makes sense given how popular this is and how much more diversified K-pop Demon Hunters can be in terms of the licensing which is possible from this. But this really shows how far Netflix have come, where they're no longer just about the content. They're about the licensing, and how do they continue to maximize all this incredible IP which they have. Now, K-pop Demon Hunters is just one of a bunch of fantastic properties which Netflix has. Coming up later this year, we have the final season of Stranger Things, and there's so many other shows which Netflix aren't really making the most of in terms of how they are going to be spinning all this out. Whether it be Squid Games, you have all various Squid Games activations and more. But what this means is that next year you are going to be seeing an absolute deluge of K-pop Demon Hunters toys, which is going to be fantastic, considering that the momentum from the show shows absolutely no signs of slowing down. And no doubt there is going to be a sequel coming up in the next couple of years as well. So are we going to be seeing K-pop Demon Hunters everywhere next year? Well, I think so. And I think that's also an opportunity as well for anyone who is in the licensing game to start thinking about how you could get access to this property and get a piece of the pie, which is, from all reports, fairly considerable as we go into 2026. And even though there's other ones like Paddington, who's going to be celebrating his 70th anniversary, I believe next year or the year after, I think K-pop Demon Hunters is the one to look out for. All right. Now, in other news, in the US, Target have cut 1,000. Now, they also recently had a change in CEO, which we talked about a few weeks back, but they've now announced that they're going to be cutting 1,000 jobs across their corporate divisions. So rather than from the supply chain or in retail stores, they're looking to specifically cut this from executive jobs. And this is all so that they can actually centralize more corporate functions in the Minneapolis HQ. Now, while this is under the guise of streamlining and restructuring to become more nimble and robust in terms of what they do, it does come off the back that they've had very disappointing earnings over the last several quarters and are also now cautiously looking at what the holiday season is going to bring. And as you can imagine, as a publicly listed brand and one of the biggest retailers in America, they have a real eye towards the bottom line, which means that they do need to make these changes, not just to streamline, but also to cut costs as well. So it's going to be interesting where this actually leads the brand, whether this push towards more remote work, agility, streamlining is actually going to help Target come back on top, or whether they're going to be pulling back too far and are going to end up struggling in the long term because they're going to be cutting too much. Luckily for us, Target Australia are unaffected by these moves, although it will be interesting to see that if this works, this becomes a model which other retailers start to follow with more streamlining and more centralization of corporate functions in HQ. Now, moving into our deep dives, and we've only got two this week because they are pretty meaty. The first one, which I want to talk about, is Amazon. And Amazon in the US have announced that they're increasing their fulfillment fees for third-party sellers. Now, as a percentage-wise, their FBA fee now moves to 4.8%. So it has increased, by 4.9%. So it's still roughly about 8 cents per item. And this starts from 2026. And this only affects orders which are fulfilled by Amazon through their multi-channel fulfillment network and the buy with Prime option. Now, this increase, they have put under the guise of being due to the innovation and the new technology which they're bringing in and where they feel they're adding more value to retailers. However, I would actually posit that this is actually more of a rent-seeking behavior, that they're just looking to extract more value and more margin from the brands who sell on their platform and have helped build it. So while they said that this change is going to be moving towards a more predictable fee structure, it really does feel to me that it is a bit of monopolistic behavior, where Amazon knows they are the biggest player in town. They are by far the largest marketplace in the Western world, Australia, US, UK, and they can do this because retailers rely on them so much to be able to sell product. When you have over 50% of online retail sales going through a single channel, you can extract as much value as you want, essentially, because who else is going to challenge you? Amazon, in this case, is both the landlord, the mall owner, and the toll collector in this. And I feel that all this means that this is just the start, because already you have to pay a fairly large percentage to Amazon advertising, which is the fastest growing advertising platform in the world. But now you also need to pay more when your orders are fulfilled by Amazon. Because as everyone knows, if you don't fulfill on Amazon, if you don't have that buy with Prime option or that next day delivery with Prime, your sales suffer. So it's necessary, it's mandatory, in fact, that you fill your product through Amazon. Now, Amazon also, because of the market share and the value which they provide in terms of that next day delivery, their logistics, etc., I get that that adds a lot of value, because it also means that they no longer have to be the cheapest because you have that option of buying with Prime and you have that amazing Amazon experience. But does this necessarily mean that you should be extracting more money from your sellers who are already doing it fairly tough, who are already feeling their margins squeezed by tariffs, by economic uncertainty, by a lot of different factors which are affecting their ability to actually have a sustainable business? Is Amazon just going to be squeezing more and more of them until they're going to go out of business because they're losing that battle? So what is the counter to this? Well, I'm not really too sure, because D2C has always been that model which has been held up as being the option to go to, where you don't need to pay those high marketplace fees. But as most of the world starts moving towards marketplaces, D2C is now going through a bit of an uncertain time as well, that while it's still a fairly sizable chunk of the market, it's getting harder and harder to stand out in D2C. For a lot of reasons. Not only do we have things like AI fraud, which is occurring, which is eroding consumer trust, but also we're having to spend more and advertise more in order for our products to be shown as well. Not to mention all the margin pressures which retailers have been facing for the last 18 months. But really, that is the only viable alternative to this. That we need to see D2C brands really step up and offer a better experience and encourage customers to buy direct from them rather than going through to Amazon. So that whether it be Shopify, Meta, Google, or whatever, we're directing people back to your websites to purchase from. But hopefully by not being overly reliant on third-party media either, which is going to get more and more expensive. Your CPMs and your CPCs go up every year, and that just becomes more and more of a tax, which you need to pay if you are a D2C retailer. So you really need to keep that in mind in terms of how much we're investing in all these different channels, and to make sure we do so in a really sustainable way, which doesn't erode our margins, so that we can create sustainable, profitable businesses. Because if we all default to just using Amazon, or just default to only using Meta for our ads, or Google for that matter, or even Shopify, we're going to have a very monocultured retail ecosystem where everybody looks roughly the same. We're all using the exact same platforms. We're all advertising on the same places, which means we're all just competing against each other with no real way to stand out. And I always go back to the thing about brand and differentiation as being the key drivers of higher margins. If you want higher margins, you need to have a brand which people are willing to pay a premium for. You can't be a race to the bottom where it's all about the discounting, which leads me to the final deep dive for today, which is the Australia Post report, which has recently showed that online fashion sales are actually up in the last quarter year on year. And they're not just up by a little bit, they're up by 13% to $2.7 billion in the last quarter spent on fashion. Now, total online spend is up 6.2%. That's been led by the food and liquor categories as well as marketplaces. But it was really surprising to see how much online fashion had actually grown, especially since all we've been talking about is how tough it has actually been for a lot of retailers out there. Not only have we seen a lot of retail stores closing, fashion retail stores, but we're seeing customers being more discerning about what they're buying as well. But it turns out that from the Australia Post data, that has not been the case. That customers have actually spent a lot more this quarter year on year, which is a positive sign. But when you dig into the numbers, they also say that part of that is because of the aggressive discounting and site-wide promos which have been occurring over the last quarter as retailers have been sitting on a lot of excess inventory with cash flow issues, inventory management issues, and do need to bring in more revenue. So have been resorting to these sales. So customers have been taking them up on that offer. They've been going on there and they've been purchasing during these sales and driving up that total amount of sales. Because the other thing as well is that the average order value actually stayed the same through this period. So we're buying more at the same level, but relying more on discounting for that. The other interesting thing about this report was that the fastest growing areas which were purchasing online, particularly online fashion, were more in regional areas. Hoppers Crossing in Victoria, Toowoomba in Queensland, Mackay, Point Cook in Victoria, Bundaberg. All more remote areas. So it seems that if you don't have access to a physical store or as much choice available to you, naturally you're going to go more towards buying online. So no real surprises there. But it's then also interesting that why do we focus most of our advertising into metro areas? Is there an opportunity now, particularly with D2C, to be targeting more rural where they are stuck for choice, where you could potentially be accessing people who are looking for novelty, who are looking for new things, who can't just walk into the nearest mall and browse a lot of different stores. So that thing about distance no longer being a barrier, yes, it's 100% true when it comes to e-commerce, but yet a lot of our tactics are still very skewed towards metro areas. So let's really think about that. And let's really think about what's the opportunity with regional customers. And taking those two things together about the fact that we have customers who are looking for a deal, looking for a bargain, and have been saving up for Black Friday. Let's also focus on the ones who can't make it to the store as well, and really think about how do we then satisfy the needs of those customers in regional areas who don't have access to the stores and who are potentially be more eager to spend, it appears that, than metro customers. So my takeaway from this, though, is that while it does appear that there has been a rebound in fashion sales online, I'd always take it with a grain of salt that it has not affected the whole market equally, that it appears that it is more in certain areas and it is still very promotion driven. And this is the big takeaway from this, that addictive drug of promotions to drive short-term sales will affect you in the long term. And even now, moving towards Black Friday as well, I'm hearing more and more retailers really rethinking what their Black Friday strategy is going to be and not focus on site-wide and keeping the sales short, sharp, and sweet to avoid a long hangover and still to maintain some level of FOMO in the brand. So as we head into Black Friday, hopefully you have everything locked in and are ready to go. If you are on Amazon, I'd love to hear what you think about this, whether you feel that Amazon is the channel which is worth investing into, and this is just the cost of doing business, or whether you feel that this is rent-seeking behavior, which is what I think it is. So also, if you are operating regionally as well, I'm super curious to see whether you've seen a growth in your regional sales and whether this is a trend which is applying across to lots of different retailers or whether the ones who are focusing primarily into those regional areas. All right, we're heading up into Black Friday. Everyone, make sure you've got all your plans in place, tune out the noise, lock in, get your work done, and have a successful month. In the meantime, keep innovating, keep growing, and keep selling. And I'll be back here with Alex next week.